Welcome to Religiously Incorrect Podcast. We are here for a fresh episode, and we have a guest host with us, Ms. Lea Dotson. Everybody, welcome her. I know it's early in the show, but I wanted to get it out the way so nobody would get on and say, Harpo, who this? Thank you, Ms. Lea, for stepping in. Pastor Jeff is on the road. He had to preach out of town in near Philadelphia. And so he's with the brother. Actually, one of our guys has been on the show and talked with us in comments, Pastor Barner. So we wish Pastor Jeff and Tiffany and family safe travels on the roads. It's cold, it's icy, and all that stuff. But we're excited to have Miss Lea on with us. Lea, I'm so glad we're no strangers to each other. We work together in so many endeavors. And since it's the Martin Luther King weekend and so much going on, I wanted her to be on. But first, we want to remind you that Religiously Incorrect is brought to you by the African American Community Fund. They were established in 2020 as a part of the Foundation for Appalachia, Ohio, and they support Black-led and Black-serving organizations in the 32 counties of Appalachian, Ohio. They're working to elevate the quality of life and address disparities in our communities. You can check them out at appalachianohio.org/AACF or give them a buzz at 740-753-1111. And I have to say this, that we had a beautiful presentation today in church at the Second Baptist Church, the historic Second Baptist Church, with a donation, a super big check from the Appalachian Ohio Foundation for $10,000 to go towards the restoration of our historic chapel that is 105 years old this year. And it's been my heart as our next project is to restore that to full functionality, and we're well on our way with that donation. And so I'm so grateful for that grant. Thank you, Elder Carter, to Brother Bynum, and to the crew at the African American Community Fund of Appalachia. We're so grateful for you. Hey, Mo, what's happening? Tiffany, God bless you, Sister Williams. Be sure to like and to share everything that is getting ready to be said. Be sure to tag somebody up in here and make sure that they know that they are welcome to come in to Religiously Incorrect. Now, Lea, we always start off with a little something. Can it get any colder?
No. Well, it can.
It could, but every winter is the first winter I've ever experienced.
Doesn't it feel right?
And we born and raised in Ohio.
Yeah.
But something's happening. I mean, for a while I was telling my daughter, I said, man, it has not really snowed at all.
Yeah.
Much this year. We getting rain. I mean, this week alone, we had rain and windstorms.
And thunder. And lightning. I mean, it was lightning outside one day. Yeah, it was crazy.
The old mothers was right. They was like, the weather's going to get different in
oh gosh,
earthquakes in diverse places. And now we're in a deep freeze.
Yeah.
And I don't know. You tell me, does it feel like, and I'm not speaking just from a church perspective, but schools and everything, does it feel like to me that we're more sensitive to weather and like willing to cancel things and not do things more than before?
Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, there is something to be said, even though it's like blistering outside right now. Like, we've been blessed up until this point. Like, it's been a pretty mild winter, and we've had pretty mild winters for like the past few years. So I think, especially with schools is like, oh, we got these days we can use.
Well, that's it. They have these days they can use.
So they just like, wind blowing too hard.
Right.
Let me go ahead and cancel this school because you got days we can use. So I think people are a little bit more, at least for schools, they will use it a little bit.
It feels
easier.
like it. I just don't remember like wind chill being a thing
right
when I was a kid. I'm not trying to play like I walk 5 miles both ways uphill, but I just don't remember that even being a conversation.
It wasn't. I don't think it was, but I think, your memory is only, our collective memory is only that short.
That's true.
So now it's like, They don't. It's different from when we was young. You know, we older now. We the ones that's like back in my day.
We are the back in my day people.
We have to
tell my daughter all the time.
We have to acknowledge that we have grown into the back in my day.
We
people.
are the back of my day. Back in my day, somebody put on Facebook when we were having these windstorms and threats of tornadoes. They were like, "How come you ain't got them kids going in the hallway and putting a book over their head?"
Right.
Like when we was kids. Like, what was that going to do?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing with the tornado.
Like, go out in the hallway, kids, and crouch down and cover your head up.
That's still the tornado drill, though. They
still have that same drill?
That is still the drill.
In 2024, the conventional wisdom is still to go into a hallway and crouch down.
And not put a book over you, but definitely go into the most insulated hallway or either down in the basement and just, crouch.
Well, and Jason makes a good point. He says schools have virtual days now. They don't get a true day off anymore. But does anybody do the virtual stuff? Like, do we hold the kids to this stuff?
Not at all.
I didn't think so. I mean, maybe some do more than others, but
I don't.
Okay.
And I was an educator at the time and didn't do it.
Right.
No.
I mean, the wife has said to me a couple of times, like these half days that they do now. No. You know, or days right before a holiday, we'll just let the kids stay home.
Yeah.
You know, that wasn't a thing in my house. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a thing. But I did feel bad because the one time back in the fall when there was a half day and they asked, and Shamika even said, we'll just let the kids stay home. We don't want to be bothered in the morning. Nobody's going to be there anyway. I played old school dad. I was like, no, they're going to school. I got things to do. Da, 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 da. Why did I get a call that Ethan got in a fight that day on the playground?
Should have let him stay home.
Right. I never really actually said it to him. And I'm surprised they didn't remind me, like, you know, this wouldn't have happened if you hadn't made us go. But there's like no... Well, Jason, I get what you're saying. Like, on one hand, we have this virtual thing, so they might feel more comfortable, like in theory, saying they gave kids work or get on your tablets and do this, that, or the other. On the other hand, you have these days built into the school year now where you just get days, and it's almost like they're determined to use them. And then in church world, because of this virtual thing, and I do think we lightened it a little bit. What's up, Pastor Tatum? Dad preached his butt off tonight in Youngstown. He came to Youngstown and he killed it as usual. Pastor King was there. Dr. King was with us. But I thought to myself, two things happened in the last 4 or 5 years that were good but bad. And this is like church centric. Number one, we have sort of backed off the super hardcore, if you don't come to church, you're going to hell kind of stuff. You know, we're talking more about spending time with your family and just like everywhere else, you know, you need a mental health break and all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, the virtual services. Everybody got online. Nothing can be missed if you're not there. And when you pair those two together, even though we are far outside of the pandemic, people are a lot more casual about church attendance, and sometimes pastors are too. And I'm a little torn because I do believe in the balance, but then you do believe, like anything else, like people just like take advantage.
Yeah,
like just take advantage.
Right.
And it is said now, and this comes from a website I read from here and there about like church trends and stuff. They said that a stable and healthy church member at this point in 2024 is someone who comes twice a month.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Someone who comes twice a month is considered a good, stable, dedicated church member. Which, of course,
2024. So what? I wonder what it would have been before. Like,
it was like 3.5 times. Like 20 years ago, or 25 years ago, was 3.5 times. You know, that's probably like 3 services and a Bible study, or you know, like people come in 1.5 times a week, kind of a thing, some kind of activity or whatever. And that's of course pre-internet,
right?
So you had to be there to do whatever you were going to do.
Man, we just make concessions over everything, though. I mean,
that's right.
Everything is a concession nowadays. Like, I don't know.
I've said it.
I have mixed feelings on it.
Did we not have this conversation? I've been saying it ever since I talked with Mike. One time we had a late like post-show talk, and I was saying we live in the most accommodating. No, you're not damn, Sister KK, for missing today. But we live in the most accommodating culture ever, and it's still not enough.
Yeah.
Work. And you know what? Funny, I was telling him about our experiences of listening to these employers talk about how they have so many policies and kind of like just flexibility, knowing that people are going to walk in the door and not really you know, they kind of want to take vacation right away, or they're not going to be like that person who doesn't miss a day the first year.
Right.
And they were saying how they make so many accommodations with these point systems, but I don't want to say the kids, this new generation of employees still can't meet that standard.
Yeah. I mean, because age old, I mean, I hate to sound like, because I'm not that old, but then I'm starting to feel like I am. It's like if you permit it, you promote it. And the more you permit stuff, the more it's just... Yeah, so
well,
Dylan,
you know what? And here's the thing to what you just said. We're not that old, but
old
our
enough.
church not our church, our culture and world has gone through one of those fast shifts over the past 15 years or so. Since like the early 2000s to now, I've told my daughter a lot, like, you can't imagine how different the world was.
That quick.
I
don't feel like it was as big of a shift between... Well, I'm like a Zennial, and my ex people be mad like, no, quit saying that.
I'm in between.
You either an X or you a millennial, but I am.
Too.
I'm a Zennial because I feel so far Generation X at times, but then I feel also like millennial at times. So
right.
I'm very much right there in the middle, but I don't feel like there was so much difference between my brother, who was like full Generation X,
right,
and the millennials as it is between the millennials and Generation Z. Like, I feel like
there's a huge difference.
It is such a huge difference. Like, I don't think it was that much difference between me and my brother, but like 10 years or 15 years, however it is, I just feel a lot more disconnected from the generation up under me than what I felt with the generation above me.
I feel disconnected from the generation, and start with my own family. Our brothers, I have 5 brothers. They're all older than me, and they're round about 2 years apart, all of us. We're a bit of a Brady Bunch family. But like my brother, who is, I'm 41, he's 43 now, he feels like a true Xer. And I said, chill on the Gen Z.
We love y'all. That's why we need y'all.
Y'all just get on my nerves though. But like my family, it also has to do with the values. Like if you stayed in certain value corners and certain bubbles, which my family kind of did in a lot of ways. I'm the out there, probably more liberal, more progressive, more technology, all of that out of my whole family. Even my brother, who's only 2 years older than me, he's like, you know, most of them are, I'm not saying nothing about my family, don't y'all go back and tell them, but they're mostly anti-social media. My entire family. I'm the only sibling, besides my younger adopted sister, on Facebook. I'm the only sibling who's actually on Facebook, and they kind of hate the fact, you know, that they be like, don't be saying a whole lot of stuff, you know, they're like, and that. So it's so funny because obviously
keep
who
my
I
face
am,
on Facebook.
basically.
Don't be putting my picture
Don't
up.
be putting my picture up on there, right? But I also feel a disconnect up until about 65, and then you get into that used to be militant crowd that understands where we're coming from sometimes, whether they admit it or not, because they were the ones that were like this once upon a time. So, but it's like the in-betweeners, like in their 50s, like we don't, especially in the church world, we don't have the same vibe.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have the same vibe. And the younger ones, I just don't know what their cause is, to be honest. Like, I feel like it's not their fault.
Yeah.
That they've been put in a world that sort of forces them to be all over the place at the same time.
For sure. Like, yeah. And I say all the time, like, as much as I'm like, oh my God, sometimes with them, it's like we raised them.
Right.
We raised them.
And we did. But I feel like that, you know, that creates a challenge for us because, again, that massive shift, we raised them, didn't quite know what we were raising them in. Yeah. And now we're seeing it and we kind of don't know what to do with it.
Because it wasn't just us, like we raised them, but you know, like millennials was the first generation that had like access at all times.
From the beginning.
From the time you was a baby to computers. You know what I mean? That was we was the first generation. Well, I was
in high school when I got on a real computer.
Yeah. And, so we, like I said, we like at that ex-millennial, but
we had Oregon Trail and
we had Carmen Sandiego.
Right.
But Carmen Sandiego was that thing. But
that thing. We had Minesweeper and Solitaire. We thought we was doing something.
You know? But you know, we progressed with that. Our kids had taken it to another level. So it ain't just us raising them. They have been shaped by so much of the world in a way that we was not. They are exposed.
So much younger too.
And it's so much younger.
At so much younger of an age. So they formulate in their formative years.
Right. You're
so
correct.
much more
Yeah, they're
what we
exposed to
did.
a whole lot more.
So
and
it's
for good and for
and maybe
better,
that's
for
what it
worse.
is. That's why they're so like my daughter. She on here, but she's so open minded at times. I'm like, no, because some stuff is just wrong. Everything can't be okay.
Relative. Everything can be relative.
Everything
Right.
there's not a reason
Yeah.
for everything. Some stuff is just no, but
Yeah.
they're so
Yeah.
open-minded about everything, and it's a beautiful thing because I think they've just seen so much and have such a bigger understanding,
Right.
because they've just been shaped by so much. But
Right.
unfortunately, I think sometimes they're not shaped with context.
I agree with that. Not always shaped with context. We're talking, Elder Carter, we start off talking about how people are too
what y'all
sensitive
talking about?
to the cold and how kids get out of school too much.
They just
And we
went
ended
a whole
up
different direction.
Then we ended up just talking about how these kids today,
just doomed.
we're doomed. But I mean, I think it's always interesting to talk about that, and maybe we'll bring some of our Zers and Wires and everything else. Okay, Nyla says everything is not okay. We just understand bigger issues. Are you sure?
I feel like Naila, you need to come on the show. Then.
I do think she does. Now, I'm not dogging your generation. I'm not. But I will say, sometimes people in your generation, my daughter is 15 and she's very matter of fact too. But it's because I think the access to information and exposure to so much makes you feel like you have a grip on it all. And ask anybody who has ever blown through school at an early age, and they're like that kid that graduated high school at 12 or something, and then they go to college, and they graduate from Morehouse at 17. Mm-hmm. They'll tell you, no, there's some things that only make sense once you've lived and matured a bit.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
so I don't disagree that you have more access to bigger issues, because all we had was in textbooks and Encyclopedia Britannica. Mm-hmm. That's what we had. You guys have 5 or 6 different viewpoints that we never would have been exposed to. But again, life still has to life a little bit more for it all to make sense. And I'm sure Naila's getting to that place, if she's getting older, that it starts to hit you different. And maybe my prayer is that because you're exposed to so much, it'll hit you a little faster too, in a good way. And now that's probably true. You feel like you understand more, that no one has a grip on anything. And you might actually be right about that. Like the facade of control and true, like it's been broken.
Yeah, for sure.
Like people used to really believe the president knew what he was doing.
Oh my gosh. I used to believe that.
We used to
until
really
Trump,
think these Congress people were like the most dignified people
I thought they was at least smart
in the world. Yeah.
I thought that they had to have
they were
a
all
level
educated.
of-
We thought everybody who was the mayor or anything.
I did.
We
I grew up thinking that if you were in politics, that you were inherently bright.
Yeah.
And that's not true.
The curtain has revealed that the wizard is just a guy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that is true. They do know that the wizard, the curtain is gone. They do know that the wizard is just some dude.
That's correct. That's correct. Well, we'll end with this. Pastor Osborne said there's a difference between oversaturation of information and wisdom. And that could be true. That could be true. Doesn't mean it's a knock, but that could be true for a lot of people. We want to move on. It's been a great start to the show. Leah's jumping in right away, but we might as well move on to the next thing, because y'all know what time it is. Time for Meme of the Week.
Meme of the Week. Meme of the Week.
Welcome to Religiously Incorrect, ladies and gentlemen.
Meme of the Week. Meme of the Week.
Thank you. Send us your memes of the week.
Meme of the Week. Meme of the Week.
We are, these are all jokes. We are just playing.
All right, here it is. If you're fasting and cussing people out, go ahead and eat.
Because the fast ain't working.
Because that fast ain't working. Now, Leah sent this to us. She sent this to me the other day, to our little group. And I said, this is good. We got to use this. If you're fasting, so this is for all my beginning of the year, consecration, first fruits, Daniel fast, all y'all. If you're turning your plate away and still cussing folk out at the grocery store. Go on ahead and get you a burger, sis.
Because you're probably hungry.
You probably right. You hangry.
It's probably why.
You're not holy.
Go ahead and
Baby
order them
steps.
ribs.
Go on ahead and order them ribs.
Baby steps, baby steps.
Right. And you know what? Thank you for saying baby steps, because see, some of y'all, because you're still growing, you need to stop making these wild proclamations about how you ain't gonna eat for 30 days. Just take an hour off for a week or something.
Don't eat breakfast.
Don't eat breakfast, right? Don't eat breakfast. Tatum said we start tomorrow, so I will cuss tonight. Get it all out. All out. But I love it because, I mean, I'm not against it. But I do feel that just like every other resolution, like exercising and saving, the saints get on these beginning of the year fast, which is really just a churchy way of saying I'm going on a diet.
Oh,
to be honest, it's really just,
Wait, what?
for some of y'all, be honest.
What?
For some of y'all, you're not really fasting. This is just your super spiritual way. You're going on a diet and trying to hold God over your head to make you think that's going to help.
Not a diet. Because I thought when you fasted, like there had to be something else with it, like
Praying and stuff.
extra praying.
It's supposed to
be some type of meditation or some type of drawing back. I didn't know it was like strictly.
It's supposed to be, but they be on Facebook too much to be doing any praying. And I'm like, you on Facebook all day telling us about your fast and putting up all these charts and taking pictures of your beans and lentils. And how they making, weird fruit burgers and all this other stuff.
You done told your coworker that if that chick say one more thing to you at work, you about to get her.
And you know what? And by the way, and you shouldn't be that way, because you're not in fighting shape when you're fasting. You're weak. You're slow. So don't get out of pocket with nobody when you're trying to fast, and then you want to have a parking lot fight and get beat down in the name of Jesus. Don't do that. Because I know how I felt when you've done fast, which is why, if you notice, I don't call a lot of. I had not called a church-wide fast since I've been at Second. I called a church-wide fast. I think my last year at Agape, and darn near died. And it was Holy Week before Easter. And I said, well, we're not going to eat until after Good Friday service.
Well, eat when? So how long was the fast for?
It was like it was all week long, but it was like just vegetables. It was like no meat. You were only supposed to eat like vegetables and water, no sugars, which was bad for me because I was dead on headaches after, when I cut off the Pepsi. And then I had to preach that Friday night. And I about died in the pulpit trying to preach. And then we all went to Texas Roadhouse and killed ourselves. Which is not what you're supposed to do after you fast.
I've never done a fast.
They're good to do.
Ever.
And I feel a little guilty that I have not done a fast.
Oh shoot, you about to call
Second,
one?
So I'm about to,
He about to call one,
it's
y'all.
coming, y'all. Just be ready.
I tried once. I ain't make it.
You didn't make it?
I made it about 6 hours, man. I'm
6
good.
hours? I made it like 3 days
good.
before I broke, but then I got back on track.
Man.
But I was
never tried
doing it so much, like we were like gorging after a while, like on whatever you could eat. It didn't feel like a fast anymore. Like I started finding some of them frozen vegetable packs that were like, all right, I'm gonna put some extra teriyaki sauce on this. And so it didn't feel like it. But I do think that there's a blessing in I don't believe it. Well, there's a word for it. And it's across religions. It is a word for it, like removing yourself from material things.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was more.
Aestheticism.
So. I don't know.
I think aestheticism is what it's called. And I mean, Buddhists, different religions do that. I think there's value to it only to remind yourself, number one, you don't live off material things. Number two, we all do need to sort of simplify our lives a little bit because we are really killing ourselves with what we eat, to be honest about it. We are.
Amen.
And secondly, just like a time of focus, like collective focus, like we're all kind of, which we're going to talk about tonight, we all try to do a lot of things together, but they're not always strictly and exclusively spiritual things together.
You know what we should do? Would this be
Carol
considered?
said no Pepsi. I'm going to drink them Pepsis in your fridge though, Carol. So, I mean.
Hey, Miss Carol. So this because it's something I wanted to do. Like, it wouldn't be necessarily a fast, but like getting rid of the excess stuff. Like, it's so many times went through my head where I'm like, I really want to be a minimalist. Like, I have too much stuff. Like,
I'll tell you what we probably should do. And I think you're right. I think that a part of our spiritual devotion can possibly be helping to guide people through seasons of recognizing things like that and saying, hey, y'all, we're going to do a spring cleaning week.
yeah.
And again, I'm not trying to get you to live in a hut or a box or nothing, but I just, and I'm so funny because this is not the subject of what you...
overindulge on materialism sometimes.
Well, we all do. And
Yeah.
I was joking about how around Christmas time, the economy can't be doing that bad because folk are going ham for Christmas.
And was.
But I can't help but notice that one of the main industries of our world is more space. Whether it is she sheds, barns, storage facilities going everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere. Storage facilities are going everywhere. To me, that is a sign of a culture that I'm not saying we don't have impoverished people with us, but apparently a whole lot of us that have something have way too much of it.
A whole lot of
Yeah.
it.
Way too much.
Baskets upon baskets full of clothes we ain't never gonna wear.
Yes.
Shoes we should have been thrown out. 7 packs of luggage. Garages we got to clean out every year. To me, that's indicative of something. I know my house fits that bill.
Mine too.
And I think a part of fasting or a part of that aestheticism, I think that's what it's called, is that we in our spiritual department can help people by saying, hey, y'all, let's all take a week and try to throw out 3 bins from your house. Or like we're doing with this coats, giving away coats and stuff. Like, you really, come on, let's be honest.
And
how many coats do you really wear out of all the coats in your closet?
And
For real.
and be mindful.
She said in car washes.
and give something that you genuinely
Would want.
Like, don't
Right.
don't try and sneak around and be like, it got a rip in it, I'm gonna get rid of this.
Oh yeah, ripping it. Or the food drives where you give away the moldy beans that's been back there for like 3 years.
Yeah, because I
Yes.
remember one time at one of the schools I was at, they had like a giveaway for the families, and the stuff was so ridiculous.
It was so
I
bad.
literally just went down and took it all and put it in garbage bags and went through it. And they were like, well, what are you doing? I'm like, no, that's not what we about to do. Because what are you thinking about these kids that you would think that they would
Correct.
want your trash?
Well, one thing we could do, and Elder Carter mentioned garage sale. I think we need to be more strategic, and you're giving me ideas, and this is just probably a whole nother podcast, but like an actual needs board where we're not just dumping stuff on people, but if
bartering.
somebody literally says, what'd you say?
Bartering.
Or bartering, or just meeting needs like, hey, I could really use pots and pans. I just moved into an apartment and I
Oh, that
don't
would be
have
cool.
much. And the person who does have pots and pans can say, let me shoot you a picture of what I got. See if you would like this, with no offense if they don't want it, but not just like trying to dump stuff on people.
like an angel tree board, but
basically, like for adults, for grown
for
folks.
adults.
How
Yeah.
about fasting off social media for a week?
I
Oh, I don't know if I can do
don't know if I could do that either.
See?
I should. That's the one thing I've never agreed with. People say like, I'll be back on fast with social media. I'll be like, peace. Because I'm going to be here.
That's what I was telling Mike, like, ever since I started managing people, I have become an introvert. Like, I was very much extroverted until I had to start managing people. And now I'm like super introverted. Like, I want to go home and never come out my house after I get off work. So social media is my low way of
Staying out there.
yeah, it's my low impact way of being connected. So I stay on social media a lot because I don't want to go out and talk to people.
Right.
So I don't know.
Listen.
I don't know what I can do
I was off social media for about 3 years before we started the podcast, and I didn't want to get back on, but y'all talked me.
Yeah, we brought you back in to the devil's lair.
Me and Lee was talking earlier. When I was off for those 3 years, I actually liked people
I'm trying
better.
to tell you.
You like people better?
When
like
he said
people
that, I
better.
was like, man, maybe I need to get off. Because
Destroying
I
social media
promise.
would heal the world.
I think it would.
It would.
It would.
I
We're
think it
doomed,
would.
man. I'm telling you,
I
we're
think
doomed.
we are. I think we're doomed.
I think it would
Turn the
help.
lights out.
It may not heal the world, but I promise it'll triage it a little
It'll
bit.
triage it, yeah.
It'll triage it a tiny
Give you a
bit.
couple of Advil
It's
on
so
that.
far gone. Like, how
Yeah.
you gonna reel it back?
Like,
Can you?
I don't know. I don't know.
But anonymous, who them people? They just gonna have to like
They're going to have to
kill
pull
the
plug.
server.
Yeah, pull the plug.
have to kill the server or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, social
right.
media is addictive and it's toxic.
Right. Well, let's throw some sponsors out there and thank our sponsors for supporting us. The Phillips Family Care of Businesses, Phillips Lawn Care Services, which, by the way, they do driveways and parking lots and sidewalks in the wintertime as well. They do a phenomenal job. I know firsthand. Call them 330-219-7916 or check out Phillips Care LLC and they'll get you right. And might as well get started for the spring anyway and get your plan together. And while you're at it, check out Phillips Care Cleaning Service. They do residential and commercial cleaning. Don't waste your time. Let them do it. Deep cleaning, wood, floor cleaning, carpet cleaning, which they did our house, did a phenomenal job. Move in, move out, and even all types of indoor and outdoor maintenance, renovation, and restoration services. Call our man Fernando, who is just a dude when it comes to these types of services, at 330-219-7916 and tell him Religiously Incorrect sent you. We also are sponsored by Action, the Alliance for Congregational Transformation, influencing our neighborhoods, concerned about social justice, housing, food insecurity, and just about anything else that it affects disadvantaged populations in our community. Check us out at www.actionohio.com. And our first pastors or clergy breakfast of the year will be next Monday, not this Monday, Martin Luther King Day, but next Monday at 9 a.m. at, I believe, Churchill United Methodist Church. I think that was it. So check us out, and we thank you so much, Action. We thank you so much, Phillips Care. We thank you so much, Appalachia, Ohio African American Appalachian Fund, for supporting us. Well, tonight's episode, and we actually have a logo for it, we'll just use it because it's on there, is IVote Black. It's called IVote Black, which is, by the way, the name of an organization, grassroots, that Lea and I are a part of. And we've been partnering with for actually about going on 2 years now.
Yeah, about 2. Well, no, maybe when was the Matt Burrows case? That was.
Oh man, that's going. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
we're going on 5 years.
Yeah,
2019.
It's been a minute
Since this time, we kind of dealt with a shooting in Niles. We felt like there needed to be more movement and more energy and a younger voice in some of the matters that concern our community. So we started a very, very grassroots effort called IVote Black. Like everything else, the pandemic kind of put a squelch on some things, but we're back in full force. And we want to talk about IVote Black, not as an organization, but as an ideal. And I kind of want to cover a couple of topics and maybe just let it go where it's going to go. Because Lea is very involved in politics. I appreciate her perspective and intelligence, not to mention stepping out boldly to run for 6th Ward Council here in Warren, doing a phenomenal job of presenting a case of focusing more on the person than the party and asking people to think outside the box, which I think, whether we realize it or not, is becoming a growing undercurrent in the Black community. And I'm not saying like, well, we're on the cutting edge and we are ahead of everybody else, but I do think that
we are in Warren.
I think we are. I think we are. And I think that there are some undercurrents that are coming to the surface. As usual, per usual, we will probably see folk do things in other areas, and then we'll act like it's the first time we saw it, when we've been noticing that there are some strong trends and shifts that are probably going to happen. And a lot of it has to do because of what's not shifting and moving, which is Black political power and engagement that can translate well to next generations. And I just want to start this off kind of talking a little bit, since it is Martin Luther King weekend. And one of the primary concerns of Dr. King and the Civil Rights Movement was not only eliminating segregation and unequal accommodations and things like that, but what turned out to be the Civil Rights Bill of 1964 and the Voting Rights Bill of 1965. And what that meant for Black people, which, by the way, was around the time that Blacks were beginning to shift from Republican many times to being Democrats, which has held firm basically since the 70s in a lot of ways. But I think we're a little stuck. I really do. I think we're a little stuck in our thinking and our perspective. And I just kind of wanted to start with something that happened when we had this special election in August with this issue 1, it was called at the time, which was going to change the threshold for introducing amendments from the public side. And they wanted to, make it a broader threshold, a higher threshold, and we ended up defeating that. But I was invited to several calls. And the calls were basically this. This is a summer election, low voter turnout, and we have to really hone in on our elderly people, our churches, our frequent voters. Mm-hmm. And I said to myself, while all of that is true, are we in a position that this is sustainable if we keep leaning on the same older voters who, by the way, by their very nature, are not going to be long-time voters?
It is very sustainable if you don't want to see any change.
But I'm saying it's what those people aren't around so much to depend on them the next time is what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah.
Like, is it always a sustainable model to say, let's go back to the well of basically your 65 and up crowd saying, if you need an election, focus on them. Like, literally the wisdom was, don't even bother trying to get younger people registered and riled up. Just go for your meat and potatoes, frequent voters, the ones you can always count on, and just make sure they get out there.
That is still the campaign drumbeat of the political party. I mean, I just ran a race against the Democratic machine where that's how I got beat, to be honest, because I was focused on engaging new voters, people who weren't voting, knocking on every single door. I was not focused on the list and engaging the same old voters. You know what I mean? So
right.
That's still the talking point in the Black community. That is still, but the thing about it is right now it's still a successful model, but sustainable. I don't know.
I like how you said that. You said it's a successful model, but is it sustainable?
Is it sustainable? And what is the benefit of it? Because, what is the benefit of that model? Like, what do we?
Guaranteed. I think part of the benefit is it gives you a sense of certainty that I know what I have and what I have to work with.
Yeah.
It definitely does that. Mm-hmm. It gives you a certainty that I know I have this many votes or this much percentage or this much ratio, but there's obviously a breach between younger Black voters and older Black voters, which is why we're seeing numbers as high as 20 to 25% of young Black men or Black men in general who are saying, at least now, that they're going to vote for Trump.
They're going Republican, which is, yeah.
And to me, I'm over the why, how could they, up in arms kind of thing about it. Like, right. I'm not trying to explain, because we've seen, like, y'all, let me just come lean into the camera, y'all. We are 9 years past, he's such a horrible man. We are 8 and 9 years past, and he's done racist things, or he's sexist, or he says we're past that. Mm-hmm. And I'm almost like, how are we still having that conversation like we're amazed people in our community? Truth be told, he won because there were already people in our community who were infatuated with that. They just didn't tell nobody. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Truth be told, they just didn't want to say it. Now, a couple bold people out there, but absolutely, we got to stop this shock and awe stuff.
Right.
I feel like we have two dynamics when it comes to how we view Black people in voting, especially younger people. We're either at shock and dismay. How could you? That whole thing. Mm-hmm. Don't you know what they're going to do to you? Don't you know? It's almost like, I call it boogeyman politics. Mm-hmm. I call it like boogeyman politics. Don't you know what a horrible guy he is? Don't you know that they da-da-da-da? And then there's guilt and shame. Yes,
definitely the guilt and shame.
So it's either shock and dismay or guilt and shame. For sure. It's either how could you and why wouldn't you after all we've done for you?
Right.
And I'm almost like, those sentiments are absolutely true and absolutely not effective.
No, because younger voters do not resonate with either one of those.
They cannot be shamed.
I was just about to say, because you can't shame them. You cannot, because they so disconnected.
You can't shame people rapping about booty hole this and who are you shaming?
How you shaming when they listening to Sexy Red?
You can't shame Sexy Red's generation.
How can you shame Sexy Red's generation?
No.
There's no shaming them.
Watching Selma is not going to make these people. You're trying to put Selma on a sexy red generation. Just think about what I just said. You're like, maybe if we get all these kids together in a church basement and make them watch Selma. And I'm not saying it's not important. I know it's important, but that's not the thing.
Oh, Jesus, no.
That's not the thing. It's not going to work.
It's not.
And even the shock, I mean, if not for what we call wokeness, which is calling everybody out in a good way, over sexism, over, microaggression, all that kind of stuff, there would be no concern whatsoever for Trump's behavior.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there's enough rappers and stars who are problematic, and unless they get called out by the right person or hit the right slick spot or somebody do it the right way on Twitter, or Instagram or TikTok, like they get away with murder, the people that we celebrate anyway.
Right.
So it's almost like that whole they're so bad. And so it's like, where do we find space to shift the conversation from shock and dismay and guilt and shame to empowerment and revolution and understanding the power of what you have? Because it just rings hollow when some of the same traditional people that are upholding the system are trying to tell us that our vote will change the system. Right.
That's key right there. I mean, that's key right there. To me, like one thing the younger generation is not is they're so hyper cynical that they're not dumb. Like they see that type of stuff. Like, I remember being young, I really didn't put two and two together, but they have an inherent distrust, almost like backwoods people for the government anyway. You know what I mean? So They have an inherent, like, you can't be a part of this system and benefit from it and then tell me about this system. That's just not right. They recognize that in a very real way. Right. And they see that. So, I mean, to me, I feel like we got to figure out a way to give them, and I don't know the answer. This is just to be honest. I do know that what we're doing is not working, and I do know the answer revolves somewhere around giving them agency in an authentic way, or giving them a voice in an authentic way, and not just, well, how you feel about this? How you feel about, like, it has to be in a real, live, authentic way that they have to feel. This is a feeling generation. They have to feel something, and the people who we put in front of them don't inspire anything.
Listen, no.
No one is inspired by Biden.
Nobody's inspired by Kamala.
Nobody's inspired by Kamala just because she black, kinda.
That fell flat.
They tried to push that.
They tried to push that. And it just didn't, not the fact she was a doggone prosecutor.
I mean, black women like me was like, cool. I mean, I still,
but
still, I'm
it
like,
didn't have that.
But it did not rally the troops.
Right.
It didn't.
Yeah. It didn't do what we thought it was going to do. We didn't think it was going to do. It didn't do what they thought. I didn't think it was going to do much. It was going to do. What you said about bringing agency, and that was a part of my argument for Lea. And it's not to say that Lea could have been replaced by anybody else, because I did feel she was qualified for that position. But one of the arguments I did make several times, and the second time I made this argument is, unless you show the people that you're willing to work alongside an upending sort of revolutionary side, you're going to end up losing the edge you had. And I had that when I ran as a write-in against Mr. Polivka, who was up against the ropes, even though I wasn't the main one, because I'm just running as a write-in. Actually, Mary Williams, who was the Republican, had him up against the rope. If you worked the numbers out, I very well might have been the spoiler that prevented her from winning by jumping in to it. But one of my points at that time was, and I got a call, and from an office in Cleveland that worked with Dr. Otis Moss's Get Out the Vote, and votes for Hillary were lagging. And so they were calling around the strong Democratic strongholds, and they were aware that there was a young black pastor running against a party boss. And they were like, well, that might split the vote and discourage people from voting for Hillary, because if they go with this independent write-in, maybe they won't go. And they wanted me to assure that even though I was running as an independent write-in, that I was still going to push black people in my congregation towards Hillary. That's what they wanted. They said, because obviously you're getting enough noise, you probably won't win, but we know you'll influence people, so do that. And I said, well, how about this? How about you make a call down to the Trumbull County Democrats and you tell them that there's enough frustration that if they got behind the independent candidate this time, there would be more believability about you actually pushing Hillary. Because if I lose, I think she will too. And she did. She lost. I'm not saying because of me.
Right, of course
that
not.
the overall
Right.
frustration outside of me was speaking to something. And then it came back around to your race where I made the argument again. In a much smaller, hopefully more manageable and turnable race, if you gave a predominantly black community, especially if you wanted to engage younger people, the idea that you were willing to get behind an independent, intelligent candidate who knows the sixth ward like the back of her hand, with no shade to the other candidate who's a traditional, Democratic candidate running under the banner, you'd be surprised at how you could spark a movement that actually pushes people back into the camp of maybe believing, well, this party really wants to do, or this group of people really want to do what's in our best interest. Now, of course, people weren't going to go against their party.
Right.
But I do think that could possibly be an eventual death knell, is the inability. You can't produce change. And I hate to bring up Bishop Clark again, but he talked about, and I wish I remembered all his points, but he talked about disrupting when you're a dreamer, and he talked about displacing people when you're a dreamer, and how that creates so much tension. But you can never affect real change, Dr. King teaches us, without challenging not just the injustices of the culture and the power, but also the power brokers within your own community that have been going in one direction all this time.
Right.
The Vernon Johns movie you reminded me of. I sat up and watched the whole thing the other night. For those of you that have never seen the Vernon Johns story, it comes off a little hokey because it's a 90s movie. I realized that Vernon Johns looked and talked nothing like James Earl Jones, who just basically told everybody off the whole movie. But he had to challenge the church before the church could accept their next pastor, who was Martin Luther King Jr. They fired the first guy who wanted them to protest, but he had to soften them up.
Right.
To take on the next guy who was going to lead them into the Montgomery bus boycott. Right. So it's we have to be willing to rebel against our own norms.
Right.
That's my thing about voting. And I think what has to happen is we don't realize what you just said. You feel out of touch. I am now one of those powerful people that young people look like that think I have the whole thing and I'm just in with most others. I'm at every banquet, taking pictures with every politician, pastor, public servant. So I have to embrace that and stop acting like I'm as much of a revolutionary, because it's funny because the older folk think I'm radical. The younger folk are like, that's just Pastor Todd.
Right.
So it's if you think I'm the Pied Piper, probably not. Probably some younger person than us.
Right. I believe that. Yeah.
And we have to be willing to cede control. Not to say if Naila needed to be the one spearheading IVote Black.
Yeah.
She probably does.
Sure. For sure. I completely agree with that. But here's the thing, and this is what I said even, during that campaign time. At some point, we have got to know as a people when it's time to pass the torch, though.
Listen.
We have such a bad problem with being able to pass the torch, because then we get to the point where it's with us, and ain't nobody passed us nothing. We just kind of have to take it by force, here.
Thank you.
We got to take it by force here.
Nothing was passed.
Nothing is passed. You know what I mean? And we don't have any type of rites of passage to pass the torch. You know what I mean? And so when it's time to pass the torch on, then you get us, we in our 40s and 50s, now we out of touch now. You know what I mean?
Right.
And now we just coming into it, because the reality of the situation is it probably shouldn't be us. It should be the Mariahs of the world. It should be the Nailas of the world. You know what I mean? Because but this is where we find ourselves. So we have to do a better job. And I said that from jump, and it doesn't matter if I'm in or not, but I am very much invested in finding younger leadership and giving them what I felt nobody gave me.
And doing it now.
I don't
want to be 85-year-old talking about, let me tell you about.
No, I don't want to tell nobody about no glory years. I want them to see it in context and prepare them for the snakes, the pitfalls, the ups, the downs, girding them because it is rough. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But just giving them, that ability or whatever just to say, you know what, if it's gonna change, it's gonna be y'all.
Correct.
You know what I mean? So we
Correct.
have to do a better job because nobody did. And this is not me throwing shade. This is me being completely honest. Like, for example, our justice, that Supreme Court justice thing was our fault. Whatchamacallit should have been stepped off that bench. How are you just dying?
Listen.
How you just gonna die?
And you know what the climate is. You
knew what the consequences of that was. That is ego. I don't care what nobody. Maxine, I love Auntie Maxine.
Toxic respectability and humility.
Auntie Maxine, pass that torch.
I'm telling you.
John Lou, what's his name? Yes, good trouble, and I love him dearly, and I respect everything he did. Pass that torch. Sooner. And
that's the thing is, and we could go out, we've talked about toxic humility, toxic charity, but toxic respectability, that you are out of line for saying something like that. How dare you tell someone else? But number one, they're not telling themselves. It's like if you've ever been in a position, which I thank God I was younger. I was the younger at the time. But when that time when my family had to take keys away from my grandfather, you know, if you ever been in that space where you had to take something away from an elderly person in your family and say, I'm sorry. But how many times was he going to just roll through intersections and be hitting stop signs and stuff? I mean, you know, bro was just driving over curbs and hitting folk in red and white and, you know, and it's all, thank you, Carla. There you go. She got all the sermon notes. That's what I'm talking about. You got faithful saints up in this podcast. She said, I was in church and podcast. But to me, it's the same thing. We wait too late until the damage is already done. Mm-hmm. Until the damage is already done. Mm-hmm. And we make our own decisions about that. And again, respectability says, well, I don't have a right to say, but only reason I have to say it is because you wouldn't say it.
Right.
You wouldn't say it. And we're going to get to this parallel world in a minute, how politics parallels our spiritual and church lives, because it feels to me like our political, civic organizations and churches are all running on the same path of basically taking too long to make changes, holding on to positions too long, and holding on to methods that, again, have their effectiveness, but ultimately end up being dangerous when they're ineffective, but we're still loyal to them.
Yeah.
But we still need that wisdom.
Nobody's saying we don't. Nobody's saying we don't.
Okay, I'm just you know, trying to clear it up that, you know, we're not saying just totally get rid of, you know what I mean? But
I don't mean to be blunt, and Mike, I don't mean to be blunt, but what is the wisdom of a person that spent their whole life in a horse and carriage model?
Okay.
When we are in a car generation.
Okay.
Like there are some general,
where you going with it?
There are some general principles about life and dealing with that. Absolutely. But listen, the whole reason that we did not keep up and some of these elections went the way they did is because some of the stakeholders and the gatekeepers were out of touch with the mechanisms that others were using to confuse and misinform our people.
Right.
I'm talking deep fakes. I'm talking misinformation.
Yeah.
I'm talking about robocalls and paying black folk to say things that are controversial, you know, and raise.
And they never thought the depths of that. I don't think they could even conceive the depths of deception that happened in that last race. Like that,
ridiculous.
That was crazy. You know what I mean? And I do think that's where the younger generation, because they would think of stuff like that. You know what I mean? They would absolutely think of stuff like that.
Matter of fact, some of our people probably wanted to do it and they told them no. And then the other side was like, all right, then, well.
But and then that makes, and that
I'll create a fake Facebook page then.
And that brings up a good point, because it's like the other side, and that's another thing that I keep kind of like, no matter what and how much we see it as, no matter what we feel about the other side, they have figured out a messaging that energizes their people. And they have a candidate, whether right or wrong, ignorant, dumb, whatever, he energizes their people. So we are in a we just don't want to take inventory of the fact that we have to have somebody who energizes the people, or else it's just going to be the same old. And unfortunately, I don't think we are picking candidates that energize the people, because there's no, I mean, I don't know. I'm biased towards progressives. So admittedly, I'm biased towards progressives. But there's no way you should have some of the talent that you have in the halls of Washington, D.C. right now and Biden be our choice. No way.
Agree.
No way living. Not when the other side is just spitting fire and, energizing. And
I mean, they put that Vivek Ramaswamy dude up there and let that cat go. I mean, because they knew he was going to resonate, even if he wasn't going to win.
Even if he wasn't going to win.
He was going to resonate and reach some people that eventually are going to end up voting with and for Trump, but only because he pulled them in with his arm on his way out.
Yep. And then what he's going to do is endorse the candidate. Whoever.
And meanwhile, we'll make Hakeem Jeffries wait for 20 years.
Yeah, Hakeem Jeffries going to be waiting.
Yeah.
Forever.
And if you bring it on down local, God help us how long y'all want us to wait before, we take a real role. But I want to kind of pivot a little bit because we were going to do a show and we decided not to do it just because Mike said, please don't get up here the first show of the year and start fussing.
Y'all can fuss tonight. Y'all can fuss tonight.
We can fuss tonight.
Yeah,
we were going to do a show called
tonight.
Alphabet Soup, thinking about energizing, being willing to make necessary changes. You cannot have that conversation without talking about, on this Martin Luther King Day holiday weekend, all of the many civic and civil rights and policy organizations that represent or purport to represent the Black community. And I guess my question is, we have a lot, but here's my question. Are they still relevant to the emerging Black community? Or has their time come and gone, at least in the format and in the way and manner in which they've traditionally operated?
I mean, I would have my thoughts on it, but I think, opinions is one thing, numbers is another. Where do they see any population growth in their organizations? Who is joining these organizations in 2024?
Dues paying, showing
up. Who is joining these organizations? You know what I mean? So I think regardless as to what my feelings are on them, the reality of the situation is they don't need opinion to know that they're not reaching.
Listen.
Because there's nobody but the same old people coming and interacting. Like none of these organizations are growing. None of them are growing.
And that's where I get to the parallel. And I put this on Twitter. I wish I would have screenshotted and gave it to Mike, but I'll just read off my Twitter. And one of the reasons I feel that is a reality. Good to see you, Mr. President. You facilitated a phenomenal Martin Luther King Day service in Youngstown. Great job to you and the Union Baptist Church. I know the Martin Luther King Day committee did the work, but we can't look past the pastor. You did a great job. I made a comment, and this is just one reason I feel that growth and growing irrelevancy. Because there's a parallel between the church and the civic organizations because they've always been intertwined in our culture. And I literally said to a friend that basically all the civic organizations are run most of the time by the church people who just happen to usually not be pastors.
Right.
So the pastors run the churches and then everybody else runs these organizations.
Right.
And I said this. If you can't see the parallel between the diminishing desire among young adults to be involved with the Black church and our lack of engagement with the Black civil rights orgs, I don't know what to tell you. And I put hint, it's because the same people dominate them. And I really do believe that the same struggles we're having in the church obviously extend to our parachurch and extracurricular organizations. Walk into your typical banquet. First of all, the fact that it's a banquet and that we're still doing that model, which to me is the same as still trying to do 5-day revivals, of like there's a problem with that because it's not even set up to organically engage.
No, it's just celebratory.
Younger people, because who can afford a $50, $65 ticket? I can't. I just get them for free all the time because I get asked to do the benediction or somebody likes me or I'm a part of an organization. But I can't reasonably, when you think about what it takes to support what they want you to do, it's tough.
Somebody had a good thing.
What?
What's it say? Organizations established, in
the past.
In the past, we're set up to be reactive. We must be proactive in building our community for our younger generation to engage.
You're absolutely right, Mr. Bynum. And that Mr. Bynum is the gentleman I mentioned on Sunday today from the Appalachian Coalition, the African American Appalachian Organization. We thank you so much for the grant, for the gift. And you're absolutely right. We have always had a reactive bend to it. And I made this comment, I got to be going on 10 years ago. And I'm not saying, well, I said it, and so I must be right. But almost going on 10 years ago, which is what, Trayvon Martin time we were going through that? I literally said to the ministers group right down the hall here in this building, I said, the world is changing so rapidly and everything is more mobile and flexible, and we have to catch up. We cannot keep having 3 months worth of meetings over things that jump off in our community, because the kids will get on Facebook and plan a rally tonight.
Yeah.
I literally said, we are dealing with the generation that can get on Facebook and at 2:00 and have a party jumping by 8.
I mean, the boys with the basketball this summer, that was a perfect example. They got on Facebook and organized a whole basketball tournament with all the city kids.
Yes. And they were out there in force.
Yeah. So yeah, So I mean, I think we have to, even in our group, which is something that we talk about. But again, what I can say, is that we have, and I think sometimes people think that we come off as negative, or I come off as negative, or collectively we come off as negative, or just kind of browbeating, like I think somebody said, like putting them out the pasture. That is not what we want to do. But I think there's something to be said the same way that, I can tell you, and this is 100% truth, we talk as much about how and what we need to do to pull in, who we need to pull in. We have conversations about who we about to tap on, who we got to pull in.
All day.
All day. Identifying people who, younger people who we see that we, that's part of our strategy. That's as much a part of our strategy as, planning around, strategy around like transformative programming in our community, or as much as we talk about what needs to happen. I think we do kind of lead into that by example. So I hope people don't think that it's just completely negative, but at some point, people got to listen though. Just like we got to listen to the younger generation. At some point, somebody has to listen to us. You know what I mean?
I agree, because I've read some articles about how we're the sandwich generation that are taking care of the older ones and the younger ones at the same time, and what a stress that is. But that also goes in our organizational models and our community structures as well. We are trying to please and serve the older generation while trying to pull up the younger generation at the same time. And honestly, this is religiously incorrect, y'all. If I had to choose between people who are dying and people who have just begun to live, I'm going to choose the people who have just begun to live.
I would hope the people who dying will want you to choose the people who just begun to live.
But I think when they see us turning away from them to focus on that and the words, and then I don't think they fully understand. I think they want us to, but they don't understand what it takes for us to. That's the thing. Because it takes for us sometimes to more aggressively and outspokenly reject the ways and the norms of those older than us in ways that feel offensive and uncomfortable, because again, there hasn't been a smooth transition and flow. So now it's a little choppier waters where I'm like, you don't understand how hard it is for young parents, young millennials, Gen Xers to hold on to this younger generation and keep them where they are. Much different. Because you're talking about the whole gamut of discipline and the whole gamut of values and all of that. That is just like the stuff y'all seen on TV is real. We are wrestling with that. We're the ones with the teenagers and we're the ones with the young adults. Sister, 80-year-old, you're not. You're not. You're talking about how you raised yours and look how they turned out. Well, God bless you. Y'all didn't have internet. God bless you. You didn't have TikTok. Yeah. So if I have to choose, I think they want us to, because what older person doesn't say we want to reach the youth?
Yeah.
But what older person is willing to do what it takes, or to accept that reaching the youth means sometimes rejecting what they've known? And I think that when we can't come about it kindly, sometimes it comes off a little rough.
I don't know. I think it's just an unknown too, because I think the dependence on those structures is so pervasive that I don't even.
We can't function outside of them.
I'm just gonna be honest. In a real honest moment, I was very disenchanted. You know, it's one thing saying something from the outside looking in. You know what I mean? Because you kind of see it. But if this past race didn't teach me anything, it really disenchanted me from. Because I had no idea how deep the rabbit hole go on how many of our people are so locked in to the same systems that have shown so little evidence and so little growth or concern for our community. Yep. And it's just like, I was floored. I'm just gonna be honest. I was floored. Not a lot of things surprised me. That really surprised me.
I was frustrated by how tough we talk internally about how our systems have failed us, including the parties we're loyal to. We often talk privately about the organizations that we have leaned upon that have not been productive and proactive in meaningful ways. But when it comes time to move on that, it feels like we settle back down into, well, these are where our loyalties are. This is where my friendships are. And I don't want to be the boat rocker. And sometimes, and I'll be honest, sometimes people claim to be doing it, and that's even more frustrating because you're very clearly not. You're not really risking anything. Whatever it is you think somebody don't talk to. I mean, like, we're willing to lose elections for what we believe.
Yeah.
We're willing to spend money to lose elections. Not somebody not talk to me for a month.
Legit. You know how many times during the election, people literally came and said, you should just go Democrat. If you went Democrat, if you just went Democrat, you should just go Democrat. Why don't you call the Democrats? No, because I'm standing on my convictions, literally. Like, you know what I mean? So we will absolutely do that as long as the message is getting out there. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think, like you said, to bring it back to the original statement, we a couple ticks behind and it's going to catch up. But the reality is Warren is kind of insulated, and there's so many spaces outside of Warren who was saying the
Lord have mercy.
The drumbeat is so squarely with what it is that we were saying. Yep. That, we
need new paradigms, new dynamics. We need new paradigms.
You can pull up New York Times and look up the black vote, and you'll find all of these all of these polls and things that show nothing but disenchantment for the political process and the political parties.
Correct.
And begging for something different. And like you said, black men overwhelmingly knowing Trump's whatever are still like, I'm voting Trump and Republican. You know what I mean? If the handwriting ain't on the wall that we need some new talking points,
there it is. And be willing to have the uncomfortable conversations that will help you develop those, because obviously it will be uncomfortable. As a pastor, I have to have those. Now, I'm young now. I'm still the younger dude now in a fairly conservative city when it comes to worship and church and all that. The day will come when I won't be. Or the day will come when my context is different. And what I thought once upon a time was radical and modern and contemporary, it will not be. And I'm trying on a regular basis to prepare myself for the time when somebody surprises me with their ideas that I feel are unconscionable. Now, I'm not going to swag surf no matter what y'all say in church.
You don't want to swag surf.
I'm not going to walk it out in church. But there might be models of ministry, community outreach, voter engagement, all the things that I care about deeply that might fall far outside of what I'm used to and what I've done. And I'm gonna have to, I'm almost praying like, all right, God, check me quick when I become that person that is stunting our progress because it goes beyond my familiarity. And I don't know when that'll happen. I don't know how terrible it'll feel and how discombobulated I'll be. But at some point, we have to start transitioning from what works best for me to what will feed the next.
Right.
And that brings me to that relevancy issue. I think when it comes to relevancy of our community organizations, it matters who's doing it, what their focus is, because I think that there are places and times where there are thriving communities. There are some traditional organizations And it could be NAACP. It can be the Urban League. It can be, our AFL. We have all those around here. It can be your fraternities. We hear the same complaints everywhere. Fraternities, black fraternities, some chapters are thriving, some are not.
Right.
Okay. Black colleges, some are thriving and trying to be progressive, some are not. Traditional civil rights organizations and grassroots groups, some are thriving, some are not. And of course, your churches. And so it's just like, I think it's also a matter of context, and like sometimes you just need that right guy at the right time, like a Dr. King in Montgomery, where the same folk that were ready to throw Vernon Johns out had to get warmed up. And maybe, years and years and years ago, I got the idea, I might even journaled about it, that we were going to be a bridge generation, and that just meant we had to endure getting walked on a lot to let one side get to the other. And now that I've lived it for a while, I don't like it. I don't like it.
Right.
But I feel like there is a relevancy question that we have to wrestle with. And here's the other side of the relevancy question. Not just the relevancy to us as a black community, but the relevancy to people in power. Are they truly honoring them and succumbing to their demands, or are they humoring them?
No, they ain't. What's being demanded? That's the question. What are we demanding? I don't know what we're demanding. And if we're talking about our
some of our local, you're right. You don't know what we're demanding because we don't even know.
Maybe I don't know what's happening on the national level, but I don't know what we're demanding. You know what I mean? And I feel like they're so inextricably tied to the establishment.
And that
there is no separation. There's no separation between the Democratic Party and most of these organizations that are functioning for the black political vote. There's no separation in that.
Right.
And that's a weird place to be.
They're funded by the Democratic
Yeah, that's
Party,
a weird place to be. If you're funded,
in one way or another, because people will say, I don't get checks from them. Follow the money trail. Once you get through unions and once you get through these parent organizations or PACs or whatever.
That's called a special interest group.
Correct. That is what
they're out here functioning like special interest groups. So no special interest groups are. I mean, we know how special interest groups serve our people. That's called a special interest group. But my thing is, I don't know what's being demanded. And then my thing is, when people do demand, they looked at as radical. And then when we talk about like Dr. King, we done said it a billion times before. We get his legacy so twisted. Majority of the people did not like that man till he died.
Listen.
The majority of people. So that's why I don't feel too bad when we don't get support, or if that there's a lot. Majority of people can say Dr. King, but the majority of the people did not like him while he was living.
One of the jokes I always tell, and I said it again today in service. I said, if you ask around now, everybody marched with Dr. King and agreed with him. Everybody over the age of 70 marched with Dr. King and agreed with him. Everybody. But the numbers don't lie. He was one of the most unpopular men in the last years of his life. He was often rejected, and even it was almost like at the beginning he was called a troublemaker, and in the cities down south, and at the end they was calling him the same thing, and he had this slick spot in between for a minute where you just couldn't deny the influence and the impact of the whole movement. But that's another thing, is that if we talking about CRT and talking about black history, well, if we won't be honest about our internal black history and what we can learn from that,
right?
Because we keep saying America needs to be honest about its history. Well, we need to be honest about our own internal community history and the things that have gone on that have hindered us. And how many times have you heard quiet whispers about who among us stopped progress for us?
Right.
How many times have you heard quiet whispers about who took the money and ran, who, stopped the development or interrupted or made sure that this person didn't get elected because they had a beef with them or whatever. How many times have we heard that? And they won't say it loudly, but these are the truths that we need to know so that we can learn from them and stop protecting people. And I put a post up years ago that said, Dr. King was mocked, called a troublemaker, called a camera chaser. And I said, and I hear white people didn't like him either.
And that's the truth of the history. That's the truth of the history behind it. Like when you really dig into that, but we become so watered down in our own understanding of our history that we've turned our history into a series of cliches, because I don't think we ever have done a real deep dive on our history. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because in what spaces do we have, or what spaces have we provided for ourselves for that? So,
Right.
and you know, so I mean, like even one thing, I went to that Birmingham. What was that thing that was like the lynching museum?
The lynching museum. Yes.
Oh my God, that was the most unempowering. That was the.
I was depressed.
I was like, this is not empowering. This was horrible. And that's the disconnect, because somebody got a lot of money for that, and me and all of the people who were like under 35 at the time when I went was like, man, I'm ready to go. This is the most unempowering. Just rows and rows.
I went there.
It felt like a trophy for the lynchers.
Listen.
It was like a victory
They were hanging
march.
all over. Yeah, I seen them. And it was like, the KKK probably visit here at night. Like,
look at what we did. Look at all we've done. I was like, this is not empowering.
I heard about the intent, and you do, but
one thing I learned at that thing that I found, that I was like, the only thing that I found at that thing was, they said at the Montgomery bus boycott, they did not ask for desegregation. The first lawsuit that was brought against whoever was not asking for desegregation. It was asking to be treated kindly, almost, to be treated with respect.
Wow.
And yeah, it was, they didn't ask for desegregation at first, and it kind of morphed into
that
desegregation. And I looked at that and I was like, dang, like if we only knew. We don't even ask for stuff. Like
that was the first Black Lives Matter movement. Like,
yeah.
Can we just matter?
Can
y'all
we just
be nice
matter?
to us?
Just be nice. I was like, wow, like what? That blew my mind that we never technically asked for desegregation at first. We asked just to be treated kindly, and I was like, wow, that hit me, because I'm like, what do we ask for? And I think it's bringing back to the point that we just said. What are we demanding? Right now.
Back to that question about demand, and I want to kind of finish up with this. We talked a little bit about the voting, landscape. We talked a little about the church and civic organizations, but this past week, and I dived a little deeper into the story of how we arrived at this rally on Thursday. And I'll say again, and I said on Facebook, and I said it again in church, and I'll say it again tonight. I'm convinced it was not a coincidence that as soon as a rally was announced.
Of course not.
As soon as a rally was announced, wheels started moving. Now, somebody would say it was going to happen anyway. Mm-hmm. I'll say boldly on here that from her counsel, she wasn't even expecting it this week. Mm-hmm. They were expecting it later on in the end of the month, and had no idea it was coming, right? Mm-hmm. And that person also asked other groups to do a protest. And I have this sinking feeling that many of our groups and community leaders feel that protest is not the best course of action. And that, again, that comfort, that access that has been gained, the fact that you can have the backroom quiet meeting, call someone on the phone, that has become the preferred mechanism, and they feel it's more effective than protest. And I want to know what your thoughts. Do public protests still matter? Now, I'm not saying they matter by themselves. I know that other forms of advocacy do matter and strategizing. But do you ascribe to the idea that we are beyond the era of needing to protest or having to protest?
I mean, absolutely not. I mean, we had a whole... If football wouldn't have came back in session, I think we would have went further with the George Floyd summer. I say it all this time, like football came back in session and people was like, oh, got something else to do. But I mean, look how much, that was the first time in our history where laws, we actually started seeing legislation, and we started seeing local legislation being passed across the country, like local police forces started putting in, and we started having nationwide, things about qualified immunity.
Correct.
How can we look at what's going on in Israel and Gaza right now when we seeing in Britain hundreds of thousands of people taken to the streets and say that protesting is a thing of the past? And this is not going to be popular. It's not. And I'm sorry, whoever
They'll be unpopular. They're watching.
I'm sorry, whoever get mad at me. But I honestly feel like sometimes, and I don't know for sure, but I feel like the reason why backdoor is so more appreciated or more leaned into by certain people is because they know that backdoor and not embarrassing the power structure is how they will always maintain that they're the leader that will be called.
I think you're right.
I think because they know that if I embarrass these people or if I go too strong against them, I am going to risk my...
Nobody's calling me to pray at the next...
Nobody's going to call me to pray at the next banquet.
At the next swearing-in
ceremony. Nobody's going to buy tickets to my banquet. You know what I mean? They ain't going to give me no community recognition awards. You know what I mean? Next time the senator come to town, he's not going to stop and let me take no pictures with him. Yep. And I honestly feel like some of that goes into those decisions as to why it's not that it's the best thing. It's just, I don't want to put my neck out there because I don't know how putting my neck out there is going to affect.
That's the danger with gaining access is you'll fight to maintain it.
You'll fight to and I get it. And to a degree, I get it. You done worked this hard your whole entire life to get access to, you know what I mean? And I don't think that it's nefarious necessarily, because I do think that when that happens, they think that I can talk to these people and I can have a conversation with them because they respect me and they listen to me, all the while knowing that at no point in time in history does power concede to niceness. Does power concede to... Never in the history of ever has power ever conceded to people who talk nice. Not when you really want to get something done. Correct. Power only concedes to power. So I think that's what happens a lot of times, is that they think that this approach of being diplomatic, and I think they have good intentions to be diplomatic, all the while the community is still looking the same because they are not being forced to own up to anything.
I agree. And I agree that we have never gotten what we have wanted without being feared.
No.
Respected and acknowledged is not enough.
No.
Respected and acknowledged gets a conversation. You know, being feared gets movement.
But here's the conundrum, though. Here's my question to you, though, because here's the thing, and this is what I wrestle with. Yes, and to a degree, not sticking your neck out there, or you know, being the people who stick their necks out there and kind of like, I don't care if y'all invite me to your next banquet or whatever. You know what I mean? You'll be on the island, because what we have to figure out too is how to get the other generation to back us, or the other generation to step up, and how to get them mobilized.
You mean older generation?
No.
You mean younger?
Yes, because we'll just be on the island, because the older, they're not going to support it.
Well, here's what I'll say. The younger generation, all we have is noise because we ain't got no money.
That's true. Sure don't.
So we'd have to convince the younger generation the value of making noise. The value of making a ruckus and using, which was Dr. King's intentional model of soaking up TV time. He said, I want the world to see what they're doing to us. I want the world to see them hosing and dogs biting and that. And again, our own people were saying, it doesn't take that. We can make progress without that. You're putting people in harm's way. You're destroying yourself, this, that, and the other. But he's like, but what other way would affect dynamic change?
Gaza right now has the whole world mobilized because of the alternative media that is showing the other side.
I agree.
Right.
Yeah, and I agree. So I think what we have to do is, there is what we don't have, and then there is what we do have. And what we do have is access to media. Like, I mean, literally, I was getting ready to send I was going to send them every couple of years. It has been since the pandemic. I would send out a message, and this would be my third time doing it. I usually wait like 2 or 3 years, and I probably should do it more frequently, where I send out a message to all the young adults, like in the church, that go to our church or been coming, and be like, hey, I need you to just do a little extra. Whether it's be a little bit more visible on Facebook, share a little more, you know, because my traditional members that are always going to like and share everything I say, that's one audience, and we got that audience. But y'all are connected to other people. You ain't really ashamed of being a part of the church, but you're not as intentional either. So be extra intentional. And when you share that you went to church last week and the message hit you, that's a whole lot different than Mother So-and-so saying, because she's been saying that for 50 years. You know
Right.
what I mean? And no disrespect to that person. Now, Elder Carter is church to the bone, love good preaching and singing, and, love her pastor. That's great. But there's a different crowd that Marvin and Mo and a Sierra and a Destiny and a Leah and a Mike and a Jason. They got and a Mike Marsh. They got a whole different crowd that's gonna be like, oh, okay, they rocking with church a little bit, and they ain't super saved, and they're not all this, all that. I think the same thing has to happen with our movements. We have to convince and grow, and we have to do some growing and reaching to get more noise and energy and activity and intentionality behind. I don't care what the effort is. The next time we see something worth speaking to, we need to make sure we broaden the base of the noisemakers. Because again, that's our currency. I'll never forget, I've mentioned on the show several times, a pastor who has very successfully built a ministry in the COVID era out of basically online ministry. And now he has some real churches in Atlanta that are doing well. He came to Columbus, to Bishop Clark's church a couple years ago, and said, we live in an attention economy.
What?
We live in an attention economy, which means attention is the currency.
Oh, attention is the currency
of today.
Yeah, for sure.
So what we have to do is help younger people who know how to get attention, learn how to mobilize and exploit that attention for the things that they care about. So whatever you care about, let's galvanize it.
So good plug, because that is the whole theme of the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders.
I wish you could add that in, Mike. If you can add that photo in.
Yeah.
We have a flyer for the...
So exactly what you said is exactly what we are talking to the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders about at the Martin Luther King program that we're doing tomorrow is how do you...
It's right there, the blue one.
Oh, yep.
The blue one with his face.
The first one?
Yep. No. the Martin Luther King one down there. You see the blue one with Martin Luther King's face?
No, I don't.
Look on your left side, straight down. Underneath Steelers. Come on, man. It's right underneath the Steelers logo. There you go. Yeah. All right. We're trying to add this flyer in so you can see it.
So we are doing that tomorrow, and that it's good you brought that up because I don't even think you knew that was the topic. But that is what we're doing is talking to them about how do you use your voice in a digital world, and how do you have agency over, because we're not like put your phone away and sit and listen to us talk to you all day. Like what?
There shouldn't be no phone zones except for like school at this point.
Yeah.
Like, you need to teach them to use that sucker.
But use it effectively, because we're gone are the days where we just gonna be able to say put it. They're inextricably tied to it. I'm inextricably tied to my phone.
Right.
So I mean, like that's what we're using it for, is just to say, either you're gonna be distracted by noise or you gonna make the noise yourself. So that's what we're talking about in the spirit of Dr. King with the 6th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders tomorrow. And it's not gonna be me, because again, I'm getting to the point where I need help myself. So I actually have elicited someone younger than myself to help me out tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the free plug for that, we're still taking a few signups. I think we had a couple openings still for the Martin Luther King 2024 Youth Workshop and Fun Day. And I can speak honestly, whether it's IVote Black, Warren Forward, these newer organizations, we're not here to try to, even though we might end up fussing a bit, I think we're trying to galvanize a new generation, and quite frankly, sometimes bring some feelings to the surface that we do feel. Because one of the worst things is to talk to people and they'll be like, I never knew you felt that way. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe I should just tell you, and it might hurt you, but I'd rather just say it now so you know I feel that way.
Yeah.
And now you know why I'm moving the way I'm moving. Like,
right.
I am not buying a banquet ticket this year.
I'm not buying.
If you didn't support I'm saying it publicly. If you didn't support a protest for Brittany, I'm not buying your banquet ticket. I'm not. Because what am I supporting? Sorry.
Man. He said, I'm not buying your banquet ticket.
I'm not buying a banquet ticket this year.
Yeah. So, and I do. And what I want people to
Well, I'm buying an Action banquet ticket.
Well,
because Action put on this protest.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I'm going to do.
He said, I'm not buying your banquet ticket this year. I feel like. I feel like
Put that clip up later on, Mike.
and I said it at the rally, and I know people was like, "There go Lea being a smart aleck again. She being a smart aleck again."
Right.
But I literally saw people in the audience because I mean
That had never said
that had
anything.
never even posted for the rally that they attended.
You got somebody facing jail.
A young woman, and this is the bad thing about it. We needed more voices because the hood is saying she was on drugs. You know what I mean? I'm starting to hear, because we always got something against our own. She just can't be
Innocent, unfortunate situation.
in an unfortunate situation.
Right.
I was so angry when I was hearing the grumblings, and that was coming from our community. Oh, well, you know she was on drugs. Oh, you know, not that one, not her.
Exactly.
She
I can tell you some that were
that we
and
supported.
are, that we support.
Right, but
Correct.
no, she is the sweetest, most kind young lady, would not harm a fly. No, she was not on drugs. No, there is no alternative story to it. But we needed more voices to say that, because we had our own talking crazy about her that I was hearing. And I was like, that's not true. You know what I mean? So my thing, and I said it on the thing, that I seen people in that audience that I know I went and looked at their page, and y'all never shared it, not once. How are you at this mug taking pictures like that? And this is what I want people to understand, that when
people see that,
and even like, we don't want to be negative or anything, but when you take something serious and you really are passionate about what happens, because like Mike and I were talking before, there is an overwhelming feeling that if something don't happen with Black folks soon to change the course of where we're headed, like Mike said, man, we doomed.
We're doomed.
Do y'all know what goes on? Like, do you know the hottest song was talking about?
Listen.
Do y'all know what is going on with us as a people?
Culture is going. I mean, and we have to capture that, and we have to take it on as an obligation, again, to fight ourselves and our own proclivities and habits. Heck, it's as simple as eating habits. I mean, we got to fight the things that we have come to enjoy and trust in if we want to live and thrive and survive in a world that is far more complicated than the black and white issues of 60 years ago.
Yeah.
And it is so much more nuanced.
Because we had a very clear enemy back then. It was segregation. We had
Right.
a very clear enemy back then.
And now we're wondering if that was the real enemy.
And now we wondering if that was the real enemy. Whoo, that's a whole nother show. But I mean, but my thing is, we don't want to come off as negative. We want y'all help. We want y'all help, and we want y'all to stand with us sometimes. It is so disheartening when we the ones standing out there, and not only is we not being respected by the same people y'all done claimed for the past 40 years that oppress and, you know, the power structures. Not only is we coming up against them, we coming up against y'all.
Coming up against your own. And it's a tough dynamic. And again, I have hope, because I want to see these younger voices, and I hope, like in this vein, to still be involved 5, 6, 7 years from now, but to see if I was one of the few that got started early, but there should have been more of me, and there aren't. So, like as a pastor, for instance, or a community leader, how many other me's are there? When you think of black pastors who are vocal and outspoken, there aren't. They just don't exist.
And then people get mad when you say that, though. Like you grandstanding.
Like,
no.
I'm the one that created that situation.
Like, people get mad when you say that. Like, no, I know, because I go, not trying to be funny, but how many people is going down to the council and fussing at council about stuff that goes on in our community? Ain't that many people. I know when I go, it's usually me. So
it's all this uproar on Facebook, and nobody actually comes down to where it's at. Meanwhile, your brother over on the golf course getting pickleball courts. But I mean, and again, we get bitter about that stuff, but somebody galvanized their side to get what they wanted. And you're right, Miss Carol. Sometimes we are our own worst enemy. But I appreciate being able to hash out this conversation. It's a good time. But you know what? Dr. King was full of frustration, fire, passion, and what often came off while he talked about hope and love and peace and grace for his fellow brothers. Read Letter from a Birmingham Jail this weekend.
Man, please read that.
Read his he just totally tore down the white moderates who thought they were his allies.
Man.
And he was like, no, you're not. Read about the conventions when he was invited to pastors' conventions in Florida and Georgia. And he would basically say, this is not it, y'all. These little country club, I read one of his quotes today in church. We become a social club that is irrelevant to the world around us when we become slaves and servants to the state instead of the conscience of the state. And instead of, being the ones who speak truth to the power of the state, we just get along with them to say that we got along.
Yeah, and that's too much of that going on.
Too much.
And I think it needs to be talked about, because every church will have a Martin Luther King celebration, or at least mentioning from the pulpit. But then I feel like, I don't know, I feel like I've heard enough from saying that the church is supposed to be separate from these issues. And I don't understand how, when that's never been our history. As Black people in this country, the church was always the political power base of the community. Like, we talked about politics in the church. We galvanized, we mobilized money and people and resources from the church. The church has always been intrinsically tied into the political maneuverings of this country. It's like you can't have it both ways. You can't love for when the pastors is called on when there's a shooting or when there's something to be talked about, to go to the pastors, but then say, well, what we supposed to do is pray. What we supposed to do is that's not what we supposed to do.
Correct. Think about this. We forget that the movement had to be funded. Not only on this because we're over our time, we're on our time, but I will say this. As I thought about whether it's banquets, church services, whatever, what do we have to raise money and galvanize for? You know what we say now? Scholarships.
Yes, it's always a scholarship banquet, ain't it?
It's never programming. It's never, it's never, okay, we're going to fund so that we can pay leaders. I mean, they had banquets to fund Dr. King's travel. They had banquets to fund the board of SCLC and fund CORE and fund SNCC. Now we're just scholarship bank. We're gonna pass out a couple $500,000 scholarships after we spend $20,000 at DVSTs. We're gonna do that. And I'm like, okay, but there's got to be something. And yes, we all value education, no doubt about it. But again, that goes back to being trapped in a model and not being willing to think outside of it and saying, yes, that's one avenue and path of helpfulness and empowerment. But there are so many others. And what are we doing to help build those others up? We should be able to pay the salaries of some of our outspoken activists so that they don't have to depend. I've said it at Second, and I leave. I said the one blessing of being a full-time young pastor in Warren, especially the type of pastor that I am, is that I can never have someone take my job from me for speaking out against injustice. And when I worked for the state, I lived with that fear. When I worked for the state of Ohio, and the commissioners had a say in who worked downtown at that meeting, at that building, I couldn't say, or at least I was too stupid to know that I couldn't say as much. I said, but that's the power of the Black church and the Black church leader being for the Black people, is that if you're funding me, I can speak for you. Right. And nobody can get in between that. Now, that's a precious relationship that is unique to us. And I think we're losing the power of it. So, Lea, thank you.
And can I just say, I would have every banquet. No, I shouldn't say that because that's not nice. But I'm not going to DVSTs having my bank. No, I'm not doing that. I'll go get.
I'll do the Second Baptist basement before I do.
I will go to RBG's upstairs.
Send that chicken up.
I'll go to Renaissance. Like, why ain't nobody having banquets at Renaissance? Like, how do we keep going outside of our community? Oh, never mind. That's a whole nother show.
Enough. They'll say it's not big enough.
Oh, well, then I don't know. But I'm not giving them
It's not as pretty, man.
I guess.
We get it.
There's a banquet hall about to be open right now. That's going to be Black owned.
Is it?
Heads up. Oh, yeah. They're working on it right now.
I can't wait. Yeah. I can't wait. I want to patronize them.
Yeah.
And then once the chicken is cold one time, I'm going to tear them down on Facebook forever. for life.
Be on the lookout, Warren.
So the doors are closed.
You said once the chicken is cold, one time.
All it takes is once.
I waited an extra.
I waited 3 extra minutes for some more water, and I'm finished.
Oh,
Everybody
my
give it up
goodness.
for Lea, for watching, for coming on, for coming on and being our co-host. I want to see some hands and likes and hearts and stuff. Thank you, Lea. You fit right in. We appreciate you with the Religiously Incorrect crew. Appreciate all the work that you do. To all of our viewers, everybody who watched, we thank you so much for being faithful watchers. To everybody who comes on afterwards, you don't want to know we watching you. We praise God for you too. God bless you. Make sure you send your tithes in. Follow us on all of our social media platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. We're not on TikTok yet, but we might have to figure it out. And Naila, you're next. All right, we're going to bring Naila on next, and we're going to put her up as one of the de facto leaders of IVote Black. All right. If there are any, wow, there it is. Might as well put another 10 minutes behind that. He said, if those scholarships are used at predominantly white institutions, you continue the system.
We're gonna plan on what we want our community to look
Hey, we
like.
giving you all this money so they can teach you what Black history isn't.
Right. Right.
Love it. Thank you, Brother Bottom, for being real. We got to have him up as well. We got to treat him and have him up. But hey, y'all, keep watching, keep following, keep liking, but make sure you also stay aware of what's going on in our community, what's happening in the world. Go follow IVote Black Trumbull County on Facebook. While you're at it, go follow Warren Forward. And while you're at it, go register your child for tomorrow's workshop. Happy MLK Day, y'all. The dream still lives. Take care.
Peace.